They say he solved the universe, bent time, measured light, changed everything we thought we knew about reality. But Einstein took one truth to his grave. A truth no equation could solve. It wasn't about physics, it was about pain, a silent, invisible feeling that haunted even the most brilliant mind of our time. Loneliness, not just being alone, but being unseen, feeling everything, while the world only noticed what you could do, not who you are. And if you've ever felt that, like you're surrounded by people but still somehow missing, then this story is your story too. Because the one thing Einstein never escaped might be the one thing you've been running from, and in it might live the very answer you've been waiting for. Breathe. Stay close. What you're about to hear might finally explain why you feel the way you do, and maybe for the first time, it'll feel like someone truly gets it. They say he solved the universe, bent time, measured light, changed everything we thought we knew about reality. But Einstein, the genius, the icon, couldn't escape one thing. One quiet, stubborn, invisible feeling: loneliness. Not the kind that comes from being alone in a room. No, the kind that comes from being surrounded by people and still feeling unseen, misunderstood. Like your inner world is just a little too deep for the noise around you. Have you ever felt that? Like you can understand everything going on, the dynamics, the expectations, the roles you're supposed to play, and still feel like something's missing, like you're here, but not fully met. Einstein felt it too. He wasn't just a mind, he was a soul, quiet, sensitive, often overwhelmed by the very world he was trying to help understand. While everyone else was racing toward progress, he would wander off into silence, into music, into solitude, because that's where the truth lived, and that's what this video is. Not a lecture, not a biography, but an invitation back into that silence. The same silence Einstein returned to, again and again, not to escape the world, but to finally hear himself. So if some part of you, even a quiet part, recognizes that ache, stay with me. You're not alone in it. And this story, it might just be yours too. Take a breath. And if something in you whispers, I need this, don't let it pass. Subscribe, not for me, but for that part of you that's been waiting to be seen. There's a strange thing no one tells you about being smart. It doesn't protect you from suffering. Einstein could write equations that bent the fabric of space and time, but he couldn't stop a simple human ache, the kind that visits all of us when the lights go out and we're left with only ourselves. He once said, "It is strange to be known so universally and yet to be so lonely." That's not a quote from a scientist. That's a confession. Because behind every brilliant idea, every Nobel Prize, every awe-struck student quoting his name, there was a man, unsure, hurting, and very human. You see, the world loved his mind, but few made space for his heart. He struggled in relationships, had complicated connections with his children, felt misunderstood even by those closest to him. And maybe that's what stung the most, to be seen for what he could do, but not for who he was. Have you ever felt that? Like people admire a version of you. The one that performs, that solves, that smiles. But they don't really know the one that feels. That was Einstein. He carried a deep sensitivity. He would cry during music, fall silent during conversations. He often retreated into solitude, not because he was cold, but because the world was too loud, too fast, too disconnected. And still, people thought of him as the genius, as if that label made him immune to heartbreak. But the truth? He lost love. He felt guilt. He had regrets that haunted him, especially during wartime, when his work was twisted into weapons. Imagine carrying that weight, knowing something you discovered could be used to destroy life. His letters reveal this pain. Behind the theories were pages filled with longing, sorrow, doubt. He questioned the future of humanity. He questioned himself, not because he lacked intelligence, but because intelligence doesn't quiet the soul. Feeling does, and Einstein felt deeply, more than most ever knew. So here's the paradox. The man who unlocked the universe couldn't outrun his own heart, and maybe that's the part no one teaches us. That brilliance won't save us from emotional pain, that even the sharpest mind still craves softness, connection, understanding, and that no matter how much we achieve, if we don't feel seen, we suffer. Einstein never stopped searching, not just for scientific answers, but for meaning, for truth beneath the formulas, for peace inside the storm. He turned to music, to silence, to nature, not to escape, but to remember who he was when no one was watching, to remember that being human isn't about solving everything. Sometimes it's about learning how to feel what's unsolved. So if you've ever wondered why success didn't heal you, if you've ever found yourself surrounded by people and still felt invisible, if you've ever believed that you should be happy because you have it all, but something in you still aches, you're not broken. You're just human, exactly like he was. And that one feeling, the one that even Einstein couldn't escape, it might not be something to run from. It might be something to listen to. Because sometimes, pain is a compass, and where it's pointing next, that's where we're headed. There's a moment, often quiet, almost invisible, where something shifts inside you. It doesn't announce itself with drama. It doesn't scream. It whispers. And for Einstein, that whisper didn't come from books or blackboards. It came from stillness. He spoke often of intuition, not as a vague feeling, but as a real, living force, a guide. The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, he wrote. The rational mind is a faithful servant. But what do we do in our world today? We honor the servant and forget the gift. Einstein never did. When he was stuck, not just in math, but in life, he didn't push harder. He didn't force answers. He listened. He walked. He played music. He waited. And in that, waiting, something would rise. A nudge, a vision, a whisper that didn't feel like thought. It felt like truth. Have you ever had that? A gut feeling that didn't make sense but felt right? A quiet knowing in the middle of chaos? A soft voice in your chest that said, "Go." This way, even if logic screamed the opposite. That was the space Einstein lived in, not just as a scientist, but as a seeker. He understood something most of us forget. Real answers don't always arrive through effort. Sometimes, they arrive through surrender. But surrender is scary, isn't it? We've been trained to trust only what we can prove, to worship certainty, to fear the unknown. So we tune out the whisper. We scroll past it. We talk over it. We drown it with noise. And then we wonder why we feel lost. But Einstein knew. The whisper is not the problem. Ignoring it is. Because that whisper, that quiet pull inside you, is often the beginning of transformation. It's not a command. It's not a step-by-step plan. It's a doorway, a direction, a signal that your soul is trying to speak. He followed it. Every time. That's how he arrived at ideas that change the world. Not just by calculation, but by listening. Deeply, patiently. And the question is, will you? Will you make room for your own whisper? Not tomorrow. Not when things are less busy. Now, even for 5 minutes. Because here's the thing. You don't need to be Einstein to feel this. You don't need to be a genius. You just need to be honest. Honest about the part of you that's tired of pushing. The part that already knows what matters. The part that's been quietly waiting for your attention. That whisper, it's not weak. It's wise. It's not vague. It's just subtle. And when you finally stop long enough to hear it, Everything begins to change, not all at once, not with fireworks, but with presence, with clarity, with a sense of coming home. Einstein changed the world by listening to something most people ignore. What if your whisper holds the same power? What if the next step you've been trying so hard to figure out has been waiting, quietly, just beneath the noise? You don't have to answer now. Just start listening. For all the light Einstein brought into the world, the theories, the ideas, the clarity, there was one shadow that never left him. Grief. Not the kind of grief you post about. Not loud grief. Not public. It was quieter than that. He carried it like an old photograph folded into the pocket of his heart, always there, even if no one else saw it. You see, people often imagine Einstein as this untouchable intellect, a man above the mess of human emotion. But nothing could be further from the truth. He wasn't distant. He was deeply human. And it was precisely his capacity to feel, to grieve, to ache, that gave his thoughts such soul. He lost friends. He lost family. He watched his own country descend into hate and violence. He watched science, the very thing he loved, be twisted into weapons. And through it all, he kept asking, what is the point of knowledge if it does not serve life? That's not a scientific question. That's a spiritual one. Because Einstein didn't just see equations. He saw humanity. He felt it. And that feeling, that ache, shaped everything. He once said, the most incomprehensible thing about the world is that it is comprehensible. In other words, it's a miracle that we can make sense of anything at all, especially when the world so often breaks our hearts. But maybe that's the point. Maybe grief isn't something to escape. Maybe it's part of the genius. Maybe it's part of the gift. Because what is grief, really? It's love, with nowhere to go. It's the echo of connection, the shadow of meaning. We only grieve what mattered, what touched us, what became part of us. And Einstein, he let himself grieve. He grieved the loss of peace, the rise of fear, the silence of those who should have spoken. He grieved what could have been, what was never said, what was destroyed by ego and blindness. And here's the part no one talks about. He didn't use his mind to escape that pain. He used his mind to understand it, to hold it, to turn it into light. So if you've ever felt like your sadness makes you weak, if you've ever tried to numb your grief just to keep moving, if you've been told to just focus on the positive when your soul was breaking, maybe now you understand. Grief is not the opposite of genius. It's often the doorway to, because when you allow yourself to feel the depth of loss, you also open yourself to the depth of love, of insight, of purpose. You stop skating on the surface of life. You dive in. Einstein didn't run from that dive. He welcomed it. And maybe that's the bravest thing of all. So if you're carrying something today, a loss, a silence, a sadness that no one else seems to understand, you're not alone. The mind that gave us a new vision of the universe was grieving too, and somehow, in that grief, he found truth. And you can too. You've probably seen the photos. Einstein, wild hair, chalkboard behind him, eyes lit with thought. That's the image we're fed. The genius in motion, the mind always working. But there's another Einstein. Most people never see. The one who vanished for hours. The one who walked alone. The one who needed silence, not as a luxury, but as a lifeline. You see, Einstein didn't come up with his greatest insights surrounded by people, applause, or even lab equipment. He didn't crack the mysteries of the universe in crowded rooms or during heated debates. No, the real breakthroughs came when he was alone, deeply, intentionally, painfully alone. He would walk for miles, no destination, through forests, down quiet village roads, not to burn calories, not to think harder, but to slow down, to listen, to create space for something deeper to emerge. And that silence, became the womb of his genius. We live in a world that doesn't know how to be quiet. Every moment is filled. Every pause gets covered with noise. Podcasts while we shower, music while we eat, notifications during conversations. It's not just distraction, it's addiction. And the cost? We lose the one place where the real answers live, within. Einstein didn't just tolerate solitude, he cultivated it. He would retreat for days, not because he was antisocial, but because the noise of the world blurred the edges of his insight.
He knew that real thinking, the kind that changes reality, doesn't happen when you're reacting. It happens when you're still, when you're listening to something beyond the surface. He called this space the calm of the mind, and he
guarded it like it was sacred, because it was. He believed that every person has access to a kind of inner clarity, but most never reach it because they never slow down long enough to hear it. He once said, "I live in that solitude which is painful in youth, but delicious in maturity." Let that sink in. Painful in youth, delicious in maturity. Think about your own life. How often have you run from being alone? Not because you didn't have time for people, but because you were afraid of what the silence might reveal. We distract ourselves, from our grief, from our questions, from our own unmet truths. But Einstein leaned in. He didn't always love it. He wasn't immune to loneliness. In fact, he often wrote about the ache of disconnection, of feeling like no one truly understood the depth of his thoughts. But instead of trying to fill that void with noise, he used it. He made space for it. And in that space, he found what most people spend their whole lives chasing: clarity. Not just about physics, about life, about time, about presence. He realized something that ancient mystics and poets have always known, that solitude isn't isolation, it's intimacy with what's real. And maybe that's why his ideas still resonate, because they didn't come from performance, they came from presence. But here's the thing, you don't have to be Einstein to access that space. You don't need a chalkboard, or a degree, or a retreat in the Alps. You just need the courage to be alone. Really. Alone, no phone, no music, no agenda, just you, your breath, and the truth that rises when the world gets quiet. It will feel strange at first, uncomfortable, even a little scary, because silence doesn't just reveal peace, it reveals everything, the pain you've buried, the questions you've ignored, the longings you've silenced, but stay with it. Because after the discomfort comes something else, a kind of soft clarity, a knowing that isn't loud, but undeniable. That's the voice Einstein trusted, not just his logic, but his silence. He once described how answers would arrive, as if whispered by something larger than himself. And he was wise enough to know that those whispers don't show up in noise. They show up in stillness. So here's the question most people are afraid to ask. When was the last time you were truly alone? Not lonely, not bored. Alone, present, listening. No performance, no pretending. Just still. Because if Einstein, the man who bent our understanding of space and time, needed that silence to think clearly, maybe we do too. Not just to be smart, but to be sane, to come back to what matters, to stop running long enough to hear what's real. So maybe tonight, or tomorrow morning, or just in the middle of a day when everything feels too loud, maybe you step outside. Not far, not long, just long enough to hear your own breath, to feel the world without reacting to it, to remember that underneath the pressure, the expectations, the endless doing, there is still a place inside you that knows exactly what you need. Einstein went there often, and it's still open. For you. Right now. So don't be afraid of the quiet. It's not empty. It's where everything real begins. He solved the universe. Bent time. Measured light. Dismantled the boundaries of reality itself. But there was one thing Einstein could never fully explain or escape. Loneliness. Not the surface kind. Not just being alone on a Friday night or feeling left out of a conversation. No, this was deeper. Existential. The kind of loneliness that creeps in when you're surrounded by people but still feel like no one really sees you. The kind that doesn't go away just because you're successful or admired. In fact, sometimes it gets worse. Einstein once said, "It is strange to be known so universally, and yet to be so lonely." Read that again. This wasn't a man desperate for attention. He had it. The whole world watched him. But what he craved was something else. Something we all crave, to be seen. Not just for what we do, but for who we are underneath it. And that's the part people often forget. We imagine that once you reach a certain level of intelligence, status, or impact, the ache of loneliness disappears, that it gets replaced by connection, recognition, love. But Einstein's life tells a different story, because the truth is, the more he understood the world, the more disconnected he felt from it. The deeper he went into thought, the harder it became to explain what he felt. He had friends, yes, family, but emotionally, spiritually, he often felt like an outsider, a wanderer, someone orbiting the edge of human experience, not out of arrogance, but because his mind and heart lived in a different rhythm. And maybe, you know that feeling too. Maybe you've walked through life doing all the right things, showing up, working hard, saying the expected things, and still felt like no one really gets you. Like you're always translating your inner world just to function in the outer one. Like the real you is still waiting for someone who speaks your language. That was Einstein's reality. He could speak about relativity to world leaders, but sometimes struggled to connect with the people closest to him. He wrote letters filled with emotion, longing, grief, tenderness, but rarely expressed those feelings out loud. He felt deeply, but lived in a time and a culture that didn't know what to do with that kind of depth, that called it too much, or ignored it entirely. So he withdrew, not out of bitterness, but out of quiet resignation. And in those silences, something strange happened. His emotional ache didn't block his insights, it shaped them. The vastness he felt inside, that aching aloneness, it made him ask questions no one else dared to ask. What is time really? What is space? What connects everything? Not just mathematically, but meaningfully. And maybe that's the hidden genius of loneliness. Not the pain itself, but what it opens in us. That emptiness becomes a space where deeper questions can live, where truth can echo, where wonder and even divinity can be felt. Einstein knew this. He once wrote that the most important function of art and science is to awaken the cosmic religious feeling, that sense of being small and vast at the same time. That ache, that awe. But here's the part most people miss. That ache never fully goes away. And maybe it's not supposed to. Maybe the point isn't to escape loneliness. Maybe the point is to understand what it's trying to show us. Because what if that ache isn't a sign that something's wrong with you? What if it's proof that something beautiful is alive in you? A sensitivity to the invisible threads that connect us all. That feeling of being outside, maybe that's not rejection. Maybe it's invitation to stop waiting for others to understand you and to start honoring what you already understand. To build your life from the inside out. To trust that, even if no one else feels what you feel, that doesn't mean you're alone. Because you're not. You're just tuned, like Einstein was. And the more you trust that tuning, that sense that you were made for something deeper, something real. The less you'll need the world to validate what your soul already knows. Loneliness may still visit, but it won't define you. Because now, you see it differently, not as a punishment, but as a passage. And on the other side of that ache is a version of you the world has been waiting for. Quiet, whole, awake. Just like Einstein. Have you ever noticed that the people who feel the most are often the quietest? They walk into a room and instantly sense the energy. They hear what wasn't said. They notice the micro-expression, the tone shift, the hesitation behind a smile. But they rarely speak about it, not because they're weak, not because they don't care, but because they care so much they've learned to protect it. And Einstein, for all his intellect, all his fame, was one of those people. He was known for his wit, yes, his sharp tongue, his brilliant comebacks. But if you look closer, deeper, past the headlines and into his personal letters, his private reflections, you'll find something unexpected, a man who felt more than he said. And that's the thing with deeply sensitive people. They carry the weight of the world, quietly. They process more than they let on. And sometimes they don't have the words. Not because the words don't exist, but because they know words can never fully capture what they feel. So they hold it internally, reverently. And that was Einstein. He would walk alone for hours. He would play violin, not for an audience, but for his own soul. He would retreat into nature, into silence, because the noise of the world often felt like too much. But here's what made him different. He didn't shut down. He didn't numb out. He didn't dismiss his feelings as soft or irrelevant. He channeled them. He allowed the quiet inside him to become a kind of signal, a compass. And when something moved him, he followed it. When he couldn't explain what he felt, he gave it space. And in that space, some of his most revolutionary ideas were born. See, when you feel deeply, when your internal world is rich, intense, nuanced, it can feel isolating. Because most of the world lives on the surface. Quick replies, small talk, distractions, performance. Few people ask real questions. Fewer still are ready for real answers. And if you've spent your life as the quiet one, the one who notices too much and the one who gets overwhelmed in crowds or exhausted by fake conversations, you're not broken. You're processing, you're filtering, you're sensing what most people can't. That's not a weakness. That's a form of intelligence. But no one teaches you how to use it. They just tell you to speak up, be more confident, don't be so sensitive. So you start hiding, editing, smiling on the outside while your inside world keeps whispering truths you're not. Sure, anyone wants to hear. Einstein didn't play that game. He once said, "I have no special talent. I am only passionately curious." But his curiosity wasn't loud. It wasn't performative. It was quiet, personal, sacred. He didn't ask questions to impress. He asked because something in his soul needed to know. That's what made his thinking different. He didn't just solve equations. He felt his way into them. He visualized them. He meditated on them. He listened, not just with his brain, but with his whole being. And you can do that, too. You don't have to become louder to be powerful. You don't have to explain yourself to be valid. You don't have to match the speed or volume of the world to matter. Your sensitivity is not a detour. It's a direct path to the kind of wisdom the world has forgotten how to hear. So the next time you're in a room and feel everything at once, the tension, the truth, the ache behind someone's smile, don't push it down. Don't tell yourself you're overthinking. You're not. You're picking up what others have stopped noticing, and maybe that's your gift. Not to speak more, but to speak differently when it matters. To show up not with noise, but with presence. to create space like Einstein did, not for performance, but for truth. Because in a world full of shouting, stillness is magnetic. In a world full of answers, a real question can change everything. And in a world full of pretending, someone who feels is a revolutionary. He could unlock the secrets of the universe. He could explain light, time, gravity, even bend them on paper. But there was one thing Einstein couldn't escape: loneliness. Not the kind that comes from being alone. That didn't scare him. He loved solitude. He needed it. Long walks, silent nights, the quiet hush of his study. Those were his sanctuaries. No, this was something else. A different kind of loneliness. The kind that follows you even when you're surrounded by people. The kind that sits behind your eyes when you smile at a party. The kind you carry in your chest, like a truth no one ever asked to hear. Einstein once wrote, "It is strange to be so universally known and yet so lonely." Imagine that, to be admired by the entire world and still feel unseen. You don't have to be a genius to know what that feels like. Because maybe, deep down, you felt it too. You walk through your day, do the things you're supposed to do, say all the right words, but there's this quiet sense that something's missing. That no one really sees you, not the whole you, not the depth, not the ache, not the strange, wonderful way you process life. And that's what Einstein carried. A mind that could hold galaxies, and a heart that often had no one to share them with. People wanted his ideas, his brilliance, his theories, but few wanted his soul. Few asked about the ache that lived beneath the genius, and maybe that's been your story too. People want what you can do. They want your support, your skills, your presence. But how many people have asked how you feel? How many have looked past your competence and into your quiet sadness? How many have stayed, not for what you provide, but for who you are when you have nothing to give? Einstein felt the weight of that silence. He felt it as he walked the halls of fame. He felt it as his name became a symbol, a legend, something far from human. And maybe you feel it every time you show up for everyone else, and no one asks if you're okay. But here's what makes this real. Einstein didn't numb that feeling. He didn't run from it. He wrote about it. He let it sit beside him. And in that space, the space between connection and isolation, something extraordinary emerged. Compassion. Einstein's loneliness didn't make him bitter. It made him tender. It cracked his heart open. It gave him empathy for the misfits, the outsiders, the ones who never quite belonged. He stood up for people no one else would. He spoke against injustice. He cried over war. He used his platform not just to speak science, but to speak soul. Because when you've known the ache of being unseen, you learn how to see others. Truly. You learn how to listen beyond words. You learn how to hold space for pain that doesn't need to be fixed, just felt. That's what Einstein did. And that's what you can do too. Because maybe your loneliness isn't just an emptiness. Maybe it's a signal. A reminder. A quiet invitation to create the kind of connection you never got, not with everyone, but with someone, even with yourself, especially with yourself. Because when the world doesn't see you, you still can. You can sit with your own truth the way Einstein sat with his. You can feel it without rushing to change it. You can honor it without needing anyone else's permission. And slowly, from that place of quiet honesty, a different kind of connection is born. Not flashy, not loud, but real. Because the moment you stop performing for belonging, you begin to belong to yourself. And that is where loneliness begins to soften. Not with more followers or friends or noise, but with truth. Your truth. The one that says, I feel alone sometimes, and that's okay. Because even Einstein felt this way, and he still changed the world. Now, let's make this real. Because understanding something is one thing, but living it, even in small moments, that's where everything begins to shift. So here's something simple you can try this week. Every morning, for just 3 minutes, sit in stillness. No phone, no music, no agenda, just you and your breath. Close your eyes. Feel whatever you feel, even if it's uncomfortable. And ask yourself one quiet question. What am I really feeling right now, underneath everything? Don't rush to fix it. Don't judge it. Just name it. Write it down if you want. One word, one truth: sad, tired, hopeful, lonely, alive. Whatever rises, honor it. That moment of honesty, that's the beginning of emotional freedom. You're not trying to control your feelings. You're learning to listen to them. Do this for 7 days. It might feel awkward at first. You might forget. That's okay. But if you stick with it, you'll start to notice something powerful. Your sensitivity isn't chaos. It's communication. And the more you listen, the more you'll hear the voice inside you. The one that always knew the way back. Try it, and let me know in the comments. What did you feel? What surprised you? What truth showed up? This is your space to feel, to be real, to come home to yourself, one breath at a time. So, if you've stayed with me this far, then maybe something inside you already knows. This wasn't just a story about Einstein. It was about you, about the way you feel, the thoughts you carry in quiet, the parts of yourself you've wondered if you should hide, your sensitivity, your depth, your loneliness, your longing to feel understood. Einstein solved the secrets of the universe, and yet he still carried this deep human ache. He still felt what you feel, and that's why it matters. Because if someone like him, with all that brilliance, still wrestled with emotions he couldn't explain, then maybe the way you feel isn't something to be ashamed of. Maybe it's just something to be heard. I want you to really take that in. Your emotions don't make you less. Your sensitivity doesn't make you weak. Your quiet moments aren't failures. They're invitations to listen, to slow down, to see yourself the way you deserve to be seen. The world moves fast. It rewards performance. But you're allowed to be something deeper. You're allowed to feel, to pause, to not have it all figured out. That's the truth Einstein knew. And it's the truth I hope you carry with you now. So before you go, I want to ask you something simple, but real. What's the one feeling you've been afraid to share, but need to? Write it in the comments. One word, one sentence, or just say, I feel it too. Say it for yourself. Say it for someone else who might be scrolling in silence right now, waiting to know they're not alone. And if this video felt like something true, something human, don't just leave quietly. Subscribe. Not because of me, but because maybe it's time you stopped walking through this life feeling misunderstood. There's a quiet community building here. People like you, feeling deeply, thinking quietly, waking up slowly. Come be part of it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for feeling this with me. We'll talk again soon. And until then, remember this. You are not too much. You are not broken. You are human. And you are needed exactly as you are.